In this video, I'm going to run through the steps to take this raw, unedited photo on the left through to this final, fully processed image on the right. So here's our raw, unedited photo of the sparrow. First thing I'm going to do is sort the crop out. I want to come in quite tight on the sparrow. I want to remove this section and this section of the bush from the final image. So I'm just going to come in like that. Keep it in 3:2. I quite like that aspect ratio. So there's our starting crop. I might change it a bit later, but let's start with that for now. Now I'm going to change the profile and then correct the exposure, and then I'll probably set the brightest point as well using the tone curve. So we change the profile and then I need to correct the exposure. And then just using the brightest point in the tone curve, I'm going to bring this down just before it's clipping. I might adjust this later, but for now that's our starting point. Now I'm going to bring some colour back in. Changing that profile has really lost a lot of the colour. And as I very often do, using the calibration controls, just so I get a bit more control over how much of each channel I'm bringing back in. And I'll probably do some fine tuning with the HSL panel later as well. But I think for now, that's a good start with our colour. Now I'm going to have a go at removing some of the noise. It's not too bad, but now we're cropped in a bit more. I am seeing a bit there, so just going to zoom into here. And then let's just bring that down a little bit. Something like that. I don't mind a bit of noise. Doesn't bother me too much. Make sure I'm not losing any detail. The sparrow is really lacking some contrast and depth to its colour, and also some definition in the feathers and in the details. So I think the first step is going to be, let's create a mask of the sparrow, and I'm going to use this object selection, and then we'll just draw a rectangle around it and see what that gets us. Okay, that's a really good start. So need to fix this bit here and maybe erase this bit of twig here. I think it's picked this up maybe somehow. Okay, let's zoom in here. And then I'm just going to add to mask with a brush, and I'm just going to paint in over the edges. Some of these edges look a bit jagged. I'm going to leave it for now, and you can see it's actually filled in a bit of the sky behind. I'm going to see when I've made my edits if that affects things. If it does, then I might come around and tidy that up a bit. I don't think I'm going to bother trying to get to these details. No, let's leave that. And then let's have a look down at its feet. So let's subtract with a brush. And I'm just going to get rid of this. Yeah, I had selected that. Again, you can see it's a bit jagged here, but I don't think that's going to make a huge difference. Picked up a bit of leaf there. Let's get rid of that. And then let's look at the mask again. Yep, that's a good start. So let's call that Sparrow. And I think the first step is going to be, let's just pull the contrast, or pull the shadows down a bit. Just perhaps a bit too extreme there. Just add a bit of contrast to it. That's brought a bit more depth into the colours. So now let's look at adding in some detail. I'm going to use clarity and texture mostly, I think. Right, let's zoom in first. And then select the mask. I usually start with clarity and something like this because it has the biggest effect. Don't want to go too far with either one. just enough to make a difference and bring out some of those details. Okay. While we're working on the details of the sparrow, I want to bring out the highlights in the eye. So let's zoom in. And then I'm going to use the brush to draw a mask. I think probably let's start using the curves tool. See if we can get those highlights to stand out a bit more. Okay, as soon as I do that, really starting to see a lot of the grain and noise in there. So I'm going to smooth that out. And we've lost a bit of detail. I'm not sure. I think that's helping a bit. I think I still want to get a bit more brightness out of it if I can. Let's see if we can use... Ah, there we go. That's really helping. Let's have a look at that. Okay, yeah, that's a lot better. What's interesting is I know what this building is. I took this photo really close to my home. I know exactly what that building is and this skyline. Now I want to start thinking about some of the other elements in the photo. I want to address the bush that it's stood on, that the sparrow stood on. See if I can push some of these yellows to more greens, give it a more uniform colour, and then maybe reduce the saturation or the luminance to help separate it from the main subject of the photo. So I'm just going to try moving these colours. Let's see what happens. I don't want it to affect the sparrow's colours too much. I'm just going to try and push these more green. Okay, I can go quite far. That's good. And then I'm just going to try and bring the luminance down. There we go, that's helping the sparrow stand out a bit more. Next I'm going to add a linear gradient to the bottom so I can reduce the exposure and help draw the viewer's eye to the main subject, which is the sparrow. Okay, let's give that previous mask a name. We're going to create a linear gradient, hold shift and drag up, and that will create it perfectly horizontal. I'm not going to go too extreme with this. I just want to pull that exposure down slightly. I'm using the curves control. I just feel like I've got a bit more fine control over it using this. Something like that. Okay, so there's just a few more steps now. I want to address the color of the bush. It's a bit too saturated. I want to bring that down and perhaps bring the saturation and the color of the sparrow up, and then maybe see if I can do something with this patch of background here. So first off, let's have a look at the saturation of these greens. They're a bit too, it's a bit too saturated. Bring them down to something like that. So now let's add a bit more saturation to the sparrow. It's looking a bit flat. And I think I'm just going to select the mask and use the saturation slider here. I don't want to go too wild. I want to keep this a fairly natural looking edit, but I do want the sparrow to stand out from the background more. So let's try that. Now I'm going to add a radial gradient up in the top left. And I just want to see if I can get rid of some of this sort of colour. And I'm just going to use the dehaze. Let's bring that down. Just to really push that background away. I've noticed an issue with the green leaves in the background. It's got this really jagged edge, and I think this has happened where I pulled the luminance down of that green colour. I think I pulled it down too much, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that back up slightly till that's not having an effect, which is quite a long way. Maybe I'll try and bring these aquas and blues down that are in the background to match. That helps a little bit maybe. And then I think I'm just going to go back to the mask with the linear gradient at the bottom. Move that up. And then I'm going to let's bring the exposure down a bit. To there. One thing I'd like to do is add a bit more brightness and contrast to the overall image. And I think I'm just going to use the tone curve for that. So I'm just going to bring the brightness up and then drop the shadows here, and you'll see those colours on the feathers and the colours of the sparrow really start to fill out and become a lot more rich. So now let's take a look at our before and after.